Imagine convincing the world that a single drop of blood could detect hundreds of diseases. Investors poured in billions. Pharmacies partnered with the company, and the media crowned its founder, Elizabeth Holmes, the next Steve Jobs. Her startup, Theranos, was valued at $9 billion and promised to revolutionize healthcare forever. But behind the scenes, the machines barely worked. When a journalist from the Wall Street Journal began asking questions, the entire empire started to crumble. What followed became one of the biggest tech scandals in history, destroying a billion-dollar company and sending its founder to prison.
In Silicon Valley, bold ideas are currency. Entrepreneurs promise to reinvent industries, investors chase the next disruptive breakthrough, and the media celebrates founders who appear capable of changing the world. In the early 2010s, one company seemed to embody everything people loved about the startup ecosystem. That company was Theranos, and its founder was Elizabeth Holmes. Holmes was young, confident, and determined to transform healthcare. While studying chemical engineering at Stanford University, she became fascinated with the idea of making blood testing faster, cheaper, and easier. Traditional blood tests required patients to provide several tubes of blood drawn from a vein using needles. The samples would then be sent to large laboratories, where technicians processed them using complex machines. The process could take hours or even days. Holmes believed she had a better solution. Her idea was simple but revolutionary. Instead of drawing large tubes of blood, doctors could run hundreds of diagnostic tests using just a few drops of blood from a finger prick. If the technology worked, it could change medicine forever. Patients would receive faster results, healthcare costs could drop, and diseases might be detected earlier than ever before. In 2003, Holmes left Stanford and launched her company. She named it Theranos, combining the words therapy and diagnosis. From the beginning, she presented the company as a mission-driven startup focused on empowering patients. Investors quickly became interested in the concept. Healthcare was a massive industry, and any innovation that could reduce costs while improving efficiency had enormous potential. Over the next decade, Theranos attracted hundreds of millions of dollars from wealthy investors and venture capital firms. The company built an impressive board of directors filled with influential figures. Former government officials, military leaders, and business executives joined the company's leadership structure. Their presence helped convince investors that Theranos was credible and trustworthy.
By 2014, the company's valuation had reached an astonishing $9 billion. Holmes herself was declared one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in history. Media outlets across the world praised her as a visionary entrepreneur. She appeared on magazine covers and spoke at global conferences about the future of healthcare. Her public image became iconic. Holmes often wore black turtlenecks, which led many journalists to compare her with Steve Jobs. She spoke calmly and confidently about the mission of Theranos, explaining how the company would make blood testing accessible to millions of people. The company's technology was built around a small device designed to perform blood tests quickly using minimal blood samples. Internally, the machine was known as the Edison. Holmes claimed the device could run dozens or even hundreds of tests using just a drop of blood. To prove the technology's real-world potential, Theranos partnered with major companies. One of the most important partnerships was with Walgreens, one of the largest pharmacy chains in the United States. Theranos testing centers began appearing inside Walgreens stores, allowing customers to walk in and get blood tests within minutes. To the public, it looked like the future of medicine had finally arrived. Investors celebrated the company as one of the most promising startups in Silicon Valley. Patients were excited about the convenience of fast blood testing, and Holmes appeared to be leading a healthcare revolution. But behind the scenes, something was going very wrong.
The success of Theranos depended entirely on one critical piece of technology. The company claimed its machines could perform complex laboratory tests using extremely small amounts of blood. According to Elizabeth Holmes, this innovation would replace traditional laboratory systems and make blood testing far more accessible. Inside Theranos headquarters, engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to develop the device. The machine, known internally as the Edison, was designed to automate blood analysis. Instead of requiring large machines and centralized laboratories, the Edison would sit in pharmacies and clinics, allowing doctors to run tests almost instantly. The concept was revolutionary, but building such a machine proved far more difficult than Holmes had promised investors. Blood testing is an incredibly complex process. Many diagnostic tests require precise chemical reactions and carefully calibrated equipment. Even small errors can produce inaccurate results. As engineers began testing the Edison device, problems quickly appeared. The machine struggled to run certain types of blood tests. Some tests produced inconsistent readings, others failed entirely. In many cases, the device simply could not perform the tests the company had advertised. For the scientists working inside Theranos laboratories, the situation was deeply concerning. Accurate blood testing is critical in healthcare. Doctors rely on laboratory results to diagnose diseases, monitor medical conditions, and determine treatments. If a blood test produces incorrect data, it can lead to dangerous medical decisions.
Several employees raised internal concerns about the reliability of the technology. They warned that the Edison device was not ready for widespread use. Some scientists argued that the company should slow down its expansion and focus on improving the machines before offering tests to real patients. But inside Theranos, criticism was rarely welcomed. The company operated under strict secrecy. Employees were separated into different departments, and communication between teams was limited. Many workers were not allowed to discuss their projects with colleagues in other divisions. Former employees later described a culture of fear and pressure. Workers were expected to believe in the company's mission and avoid questioning leadership decisions. Those who pushed back against the technology's limitations sometimes found themselves removed from projects or dismissed entirely. Despite the technical challenges, Theranos continued promoting its technology publicly. Investors were told the machines worked perfectly. Marketing materials described the Edison device as a revolutionary medical breakthrough. To support the company's expansion, Theranos opened testing centers inside Walgreens locations. Customers could walk into the pharmacy, provide a finger prick blood sample, and supposedly receive dozens of diagnostic tests quickly. However, many of those tests were not actually being performed by the Edison machine. Instead, some blood samples were secretly analyzed using traditional laboratory equipment manufactured by other companies. In some cases, the samples were diluted to make them compatible with conventional testing machines. This meant the technology Theranos had promised investors and the public was not truly performing the work. For a while, the company managed to keep these issues hidden. The media continued praising Holmes as a visionary entrepreneur. Investors kept believing the company was on the verge of transforming healthcare. But eventually, the truth began to surface. And when it did, it would trigger one of the most explosive investigations Silicon Valley had ever seen.
In 2015, the story of Theranos began to unravel. The turning point came when investigative journalist John Carreyrou from the Wall Street Journal received a confidential tip from a source familiar with the company. The source claimed that the revolutionary blood testing technology promoted by Elizabeth Holmes might not actually work as advertised. At first, the claim seemed almost unbelievable. Theranos had billions of dollars in funding, partnerships with major corporations, and a powerful board of directors. The company was widely celebrated as one of Silicon Valley's most promising startups. But Carreyrou decided to investigate further. Over the next several months, he interviewed former employees, reviewed internal documents, and spoke with medical experts. Slowly, a troubling pattern began to emerge. Several former workers described serious problems with the company's testing technology. According to their accounts, the Edison machines often produced inaccurate results. Some tests failed completely. Others generated readings that did not match results produced by traditional laboratory equipment. Even more troubling, sources revealed that many blood tests were not actually being performed on Theranos machines at all. Instead, the company was secretly using standard laboratory analyzers manufactured by other companies to process patient samples. In other words, the revolutionary technology that had attracted billions of dollars in investment was not functioning as promised.
Carreyrou continued gathering evidence and speaking with insiders who were willing to describe what they had witnessed inside the company.
Many of these sources were afraid to speak publicly because Theranos had a reputation for aggressive legal action against critics. Despite these challenges, Carreyrou eventually published a groundbreaking investigation in the Wall Street Journal. The article sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley. For the first time, the public learned that the technology behind Theranos might be deeply flawed. Investors began questioning whether the company had exaggerated its capabilities. Holmes responded quickly to the accusations. She denied the claims and insisted the company's technology was reliable. Theranos executives accused the newspaper of publishing inaccurate information. But the story did not disappear. Regulators soon began examining the company's laboratory operations. Government inspectors reviewed testing procedures and evaluated the accuracy of Theranos results. What they discovered raised serious concerns. Inspectors found that some laboratory practices did not meet required standards. Certain testing methods produced inconsistent results. In some cases, patient samples may have been handled improperly. These findings triggered deeper investigations by federal agencies responsible for regulating medical laboratories. At the same time, more former employees began speaking with journalists and investigators. Many described internal struggles with the Edison technology and pressure from leadership to continue presenting the company as successful. As the evidence mounted, the credibility of Theranos began to collapse. Investors grew nervous. Business partners started reconsidering their relationships with the company. And the healthcare revolution that Holmes had promised the world began to look more like a massive illusion.
As investigations intensified, the situation for Theranos quickly spiraled into crisis. What had once been a celebrated Silicon Valley success story was now becoming one of the most controversial startups in modern business history. Government regulators conducted detailed inspections of the company's laboratories. Their findings were troubling. Several testing procedures did not meet federal quality standards, and some blood tests produced unreliable results. For patients, inaccurate test results could be dangerous. Doctors rely on blood tests to diagnose illnesses and guide medical treatment. If the data is incorrect, patients could receive unnecessary medication or fail to detect serious conditions. Regulators responded by imposing strict penalties. Elizabeth Holmes was banned from owning or operating a medical laboratory for 2 years. The decision represented a devastating blow to a company built entirely around diagnostic testing. At the same time, major business partners began distancing themselves from Theranos. The most significant rupture came from Walgreens, the pharmacy chain that had hosted Theranos testing centers in many of its stores. As concerns about the technology grew, Walgreens shut down the testing locations and eventually terminated its partnership with the company. Without access to thousands of pharmacy customers, Theranos lost a major part of its business strategy.
Investors who had once believed in the company's revolutionary technology began questioning their decisions. The startup that had once been valued at $9 billion suddenly faced a dramatic collapse in confidence. Executives began leaving the company, employees were laid off, and the public narrative surrounding Theranos shifted from admiration to skepticism. By 2018, the company was running out of options. Legal battles, regulatory penalties, and declining investor support had made it nearly impossible to continue operations. That year, Theranos officially shut down. The collapse erased billions of dollars in investor funding and ended one of Silicon Valley's most ambitious healthcare experiments. But the story was not finished. While the company itself was gone, federal prosecutors were preparing to determine whether the actions of its leadership crossed the line from failed innovation into criminal fraud.
After the collapse of Theranos, federal investigators continued examining the actions of its executives. Prosecutors focused on whether Elizabeth Holmes had knowingly misled investors about the company's technology. In 2018, Holmes was formally charged with multiple counts of fraud. Prosecutors alleged that she had exaggerated the capabilities of Theranos machines while raising hundreds of millions of dollars from investors. The case quickly became one of the most closely watched corporate trials in recent history. The trial began in 2021.
Inside the courtroom, prosecutors presented testimony from former employees, investors, and medical experts. Many witnesses described internal problems with the company's testing technology and the pressure employees faced to remain silent about those issues. Prosecutors argued that Holmes had misled investors by claiming the technology worked even when internal tests showed serious flaws. The defense team presented a different interpretation of events. Holmes' lawyers argued that she believed in the technology and had simply failed while attempting to build something ambitious. In the startup world, they said, failure is common. But the jury ultimately sided with prosecutors. In January 2022, Holmes was found guilty on several counts of fraud related to misleading investors. Later that year, she was sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. The verdict marked the dramatic end of one of Silicon Valley's most extraordinary stories. The Theranos scandal reshaped how investors view ambitious startups. For years, the technology industry had celebrated founders who promised revolutionary breakthroughs. After Theranos, many investors began demanding stronger evidence before funding bold medical claims. Regulators also increased scrutiny of diagnostic testing companies to ensure new technologies are properly validated before reaching patients. Today, the rise and fall of Theranos remains one of the most powerful cautionary tales in modern business. It shows how powerful narratives can attract massive investment, media attention, and public trust. But it also demonstrates the danger of believing extraordinary claims without demanding proof. The company that once promised to transform healthcare ultimately became a symbol of Silicon Valley's most expensive lesson. No matter how compelling the vision, reality cannot be ignored forever.